everyone, and welcome to week 4 of our Special Ed Socials summer event that we're all hosting here. We have our amazing team here. We have Dawn, Ashley, Heather, and myself, Jen. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm excited. We're going to be talking about all things independent work and how you can utilize independent work in your classroom. So just like last summer when we chatted before, we had questions that we're going to cover. And then if we don't cover a certain topic or point that you're looking to get more information on, or we mention something that sparks a question for you, make sure you keep those questions and throw them into the comments or into that Facebook group for us and let us know what they are. And we will come back to you later in the week with a Q&A session giving you answers to those questions. Okay. And that will be uploaded on a Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're watching in our Facebook group right now, we don't need to. Make sure that you're giving us your name on StreamYard because we pre-recorded this because of the 4th of July holiday. So by the way, happy 4th of July to everyone. All right, let's get started. So our first question for today kind of makes sense. It's what is independent work? And I'm going to take this one. So independent work is anything that your student can do independently. Independently would be on their own. So you don't need to step in and help them with anything. A paraprofessional doesn't need to come over and give them a prompt or tap their shoulder and remind them to keep working. It means they can complete a task. It could be anything. And we're going to talk about some of those things that it could be today. But independent work is essentially completing something by yourself. So we're talking about ways our students can do that. And we want to build our students' capacity for independent work because we all have to be able to do things on our own in life to be successful, to have a job, to do things around our house. And so doing this in the classroom first, of course, is important to get that practice and build up I call it that stamina for working independently. All right. So the next question we have is, how do you get things started at the beginning of the year? Dawn, can you give us some of your insights on this?
Sure. So when you're talking about independent work and different functional skills, I do recommend making sure that you take time at the beginning of the year to really assess the individual needs. If you've had these kids for a couple of years, you may know in general what they can and can't do. But if they're new to you, making sure that you have that baseline of knowledge. And sometimes there is some regression over the summer. So making sure that you don't just assume what they know, but taking time to see where they are, but then also being aware of the different stages and what is appropriate at that age. And then from there, just kind of setting goals for what is going to be worked on and expected from the learner so that you can integrate it within your daily curriculum and schedule. And then you're able to then teach and reinforce those expectations. So those are just some things. So if you're looking for at the beginning of the year and some of the functional skills, there are some different inventories. I think we talked back in week 2 about some different kinds of functional assessments or some like readiness skills that can be done. I believe the AFLS has some aspects of that, but also the Brigance. Just general, can they put things in a box? Can they follow one-step directions? Are they able to use pictures to follow kind of a schedule? So just having some of those basic understandings of where the student is right now definitely helps lay that foundation for success in the whole year.
That's awesome. Yes, I agree 100% on that one. All right. Next question. What types of independent work should you start with? So Dawn kind of laid out the getting it going, but Heather, can you tell us what kind of independent work maybe you should start with your students?
Yeah, so if it's the new school year, you want to make sure that you are giving them already mastered tasks, things that you know that they can do. So if there's anything in their IEP that they've already been able to do and they've mastered, this is a great place to start, especially if it is just like matching or put in tasks or even errorless tasks. If you're not sure where they're at, things that are errorless are things that you can just pick up and put together, and it's literally the same for every single one. or it's matching but like identical pictures for every single card that they're given. Or I've seen it where it's the initial letter is the exact same for ant and apple and airplane, and so A is being matched to these pictures, but it's completely errorless kind of tasks. Something else that I really love to do at the beginning of the school year is taking leisure tasks. So if I know my students really love Legos is their independent work, like, because that's something they already have student buy-in on. I know they like these things, and leisure is part of our station or a center that might be the students can circle through, or maybe it's coloring. It's something that they really like. It's fun, it's engaging, it's a break sometimes for them too, especially if we are trying to hand them a lot of tasks at the beginning of the year. So I would say definitely find those already mastered tasks, something that is simple and not as complex, and things that are of their interest and fun.
Yes. And I loved how you talked about adding in those leisure skills, because you can utilize that all year long. So if you practice it at the beginning of the year as work tasks, you can then use it for break time where those students are independently also, because of course we want our students to be able to take breaks independently as well. They can then take those skills and use them there. So that's awesome. All right. Ashley, next question is for you. Where do you get all the materials that you use for your independent workstations?
So you're going to have to get creative with this. But this is a list of where I have found many resources and things. But so Facebook is a good one. A lot of times, if you put just like a generic Facebook, hey, I'm starting an independent workstation, I'm looking for, socks, clothespins, like things that you're going to need for your independent tasks, straws, containers. A lot of times, people will give them to you. If you live in a neighborhood, throw it on your neighborhood Facebook site. If you're a brand new teacher, you could ask other teachers in your school. You could do a donors choose. You could ask the parents of your students, Amazon wish lists. You could ask old coworkers. And if it's summertime and you just got a new job, go to yard sales. And a lot of times if you tell them, hey, I'm a teacher and I just started, but I could use all of these things for my independent work center or life skills stations, a lot of times they're just going to give them to you for free because you're helping educate, the population, the kids that are younger than them. So I think that's a really big thing to do. And getting creative, like I said, going to a lot of times like churches have sales and your neighbor might be getting rid of things. So just looking and being creative is the best option for you there.
I agree. There are plenty of companies out there that sell a lot of materials that you can use in your work task bins. I've done donors choose projects to get the funding, or I've talked with my admin to get some funding for those things. I've definitely not paid for those out of my own pocket, but those simple things you said, like going on Facebook, even the dollar store is another spot where I used to find a ton of things. You could find the shoebox bins there. I would find plastic forks, knives, and spoons for sorting, things like that. So those were all great places to look for your materials for that independent workstations. Dawn, so once we have all these materials, right, we've gone to all these yard sales, we've asked all our teacher friends, our neighbors to give us pretty much all their junk, right, is what a lot of us end up putting in our systems. How can you organize it? I know I get this question a lot from teachers. I have all this stuff in my classroom. How do I organize it? How do I get that all done? Where do I put it? How do I make it accessible to the students? So what have you done?
I think we might have lost Dawn for a minute, so I'm going to hop in. I really organize my materials obviously based on what my students need. So if there are different levels, then I will make sure that there's different levels of materials. Like if it is sorting, that's a higher level skill, but maybe it's going to be a matching instead, to make sure that like matching forks, matching spoons, matching knives versus a sorting. So I kind of organize it that way. You had talked about the shoe boxes already. So we want to be able to make sure that you use those shoe boxes as well, if that's something that you want to organize it there, because it's in one spot. It's all really nicely put. Dawn, did you want to go ahead and add a little bit more? I had talked about a little bit of leveling of the work tasks and then organizing into the shoe boxes.
Yeah, shoe boxes are definitely key there. And I've even done like paper boxes to where you can just print off a sheet of paper and They're great for like top of the shelves that you don't need to access very often, but you can label things that are in there that you may not need all year long, but they access whenever you're working on those different topics that maybe take up a little more space. But by having it organized up top, you know exactly where to go instead of having to look through 5 or 6 different bins. And it just kind of keeps the organization in the classroom a little more crisp. So by having, and you could do bins, like the large totes of that, or paper boxes. Typically, there's a lot of them floating around at the beginning of the school year with everybody printing copies. So I've just had some success there with storage. If you have a closet, I would suggest just, you know, you can even have like gallon-sized bags with information written on it, but just keeping it as sectioned as possible so that you know when you're working on hygiene, all of your different hygiene pieces are in a certain place, whether that's a bin, a tote, a box, your store, your even if you have, like, I know I have the letters like A through Z with different task boxes in my classroom. Those are the storage shoe boxes that you can get at like Dollar Tree. I got mine at Home Depot. They actually go on sale for like $1 or $1.20. And they're, to me, a lot more durable. So if they fall or drop or get thrown across the room, they last just a little bit longer. But those are all just some ways to stay organized. And if you have like file folders, using just a cabinet drawer that has like the hanging file so that you can easily access those. Same thing for the task cards with the organization, the photo organization containers that go in the big, pretty like rainbow ones, are also all different kinds of ways that you can just stay organized and know where things are and access them as your time allows. And you have the people and the delegation for that. But don't feel like you have to like have it Pinterest perfect at the very beginning and spend all this money. Do it along the way as you have help and those kinds of things. It'll all come together.
Yeah. And Heather was pointing out those iris photo boxes behind her. That's what Dawn was talking about. Yep. I think all of us have a few of those sets hanging around. And then I even have right here, these are one of those drawer sets, and they literally still have the work task labels on them. I used to use that because it was on wheels. So I liked that for students that had difficulty with mobility in the classroom. We could bring the tasks to them. Or if transitioning was a behavior thing, right? They didn't want to transition to the work task table. We brought the work to them. So I loved those ideas you gave, Dawn, of hanging them in the file folders, keeping everything organized. That is essential. So once you get all this stuff, right, making sure you have a system and a way, not only to keep like things together. I used to keep a bin that had all my error list tasks, like Heather had mentioned earlier, or my put in tasks, or by different levels. So then when I knew a certain student was ready, maybe to work on a new task in their system, because I did try to keep it fresh and new and change things up so that the student didn't get bored with the task, I would know which bin I could go to, and I wasn't digging around forever and spending time looking for things. So thank you, Dawn, for those. That was some awesome tips for how we could organize our work task materials. All right, next question we have has to do with scheduling, and how do you find time in your day for your students to work on their independent work? And then how do you know how much time each student should have? Heather, can you enlighten us with your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So honestly, you could do it whenever. Like, find that time in your day, in your schedule, take a look at it at the beginning of the year, or if you get to create your own, like I used to do, I would just schedule it in my day, and I would do it during morning work. So morning work became independent work as well, because I had some students who would eat breakfast. I had some students that would come into the bus late. And so we all would kind of start at a different time. So some of my students would do Play-Doh in the morning, and that was their independent work, or it was a worksheet or an adapted book. And I found that schedule in my day, and then they would just work on it as long as they could, because you had asked about how long to do it. So my goal for all of my students is always work endurance, so that being able to work for longer periods of time by themselves, even if it is just 2 minutes by themselves. A staff could be local or from a distance away, but building that up as the school year goes on, the goal is always to get more endurance when working. I would even schedule it into tech time. Our tech time would also have an independent center where they were running boom cards by themselves, or IXL, or maybe a fun I'm trying to think, not YouTube. I wouldn't do YouTube, but if trying to stay something educational, like a Starfall or an ABC Mouse or something like that, that was always a time. So morning, tech time. Honestly, after lunch was a great time for my group because they were already really elevated. So being able to find that like calming, self-regulating time for them to, if they needed to take a break, great. If not, like, hey, this is now a quiet time to work on something independently that they already know how to do. They feel really confident in, because that's part of it too, is we want to make sure our students feel confident in completing the tasks by themselves and taking that ownership and high praise for it too. Like we're going to give them all of that praise. Like, you did this is something you should own, and feel really good about it. So yeah, definitely find those times in your day, and it can be any time too. If you feel like it's an academic time and you're like, I just need to isolate this one student to work on a skill a little bit more, all the other students could be working on independent work. And that's definitely something I would set up at the beginning of the year, is trying to move as many opportunities to be independent, so that if I did need to pull a student or a student was in crisis, I could go and support them, while other students worked independently or with monitoring from staff. So I think that answered your question with all of that.
Yes. And I was just thinking, as you were talking about, it is a great thing if you establish independent work in your classroom, like you had said, if there's an interruption in the classroom, whether it's student related, whether it's and another adult comes into the room and it just kind of makes everything get a little, it's a way to bring the kids back, kind of get them eased back in. If something exciting, a fire drill, right? Sometimes that can be tricky to take the kids out and bring them back in. You could kind of build in some independent work time, even if that's not your schedule per se for that day. Maybe sometimes for your kids that can be calming enough to get them back into the routine of getting back into the classroom. So I loved that idea. And then the other thing I thought of while you were saying that, Heather, is I've used it both ways. I've used it as a whole group. Everybody does it at the same time. So you can think of that for your schedule. But I've also, and I would say I've more utilized it in the way of where you had mentioned you want to work with a student, say on an IEP goal or a smaller group of students on a specific skill, and you need something for the rest of the students to do. But either way, there can be a lot of effectiveness in doing that independent work time in your classroom. So you have some options of how you can schedule it in your class and in your day. All right. Next question we have is, how do students know what independent work they're going to complete? And this one's, I'm going to take this one. We're going to talk a little bit about schedules, and not so much schedules like the individual schedules you might see in a classroom that talk about maybe the different subjects or the different places students are going to go to work. Like they'll see on their schedule independent work, but when they're in independent work, they need a schedule inside of that time to know what is expected of them. And oftentimes when we're doing independent work in our classrooms, I know in my own self-contained middle school classroom, my students need to know, like, what am I going to get for doing this, right? We all go to work and collect a paycheck. So some of that ties in with behavior as well that we'll be talking about, but at a later time. But I need to know, okay, if I do these 3 tasks, I'm going to earn a break at the end of this. And so creating kind of a mini schedule is my suggestion to let your students know what is expected of them. And Dawn had kind of mentioned about putting the letters on the outsides of your boxes. And like I had shown you back here, I have numbers on mine. So when you have those on the materials that you want students to complete, whether it's a file folder, a binder, a shoebox bin, could be drawers. I used to have them on drawers in my classroom where I'd have drawers where they would sort silverware. So it emulated like a kitchen cabinet that you would do at your house, but there was a little symbol on there. It could be animals, numbers, letters, whatever your students use. And then you'd use that same visual, and you would almost like an icon on a schedule that you would give the student for an individual schedule, but you use it for a work task schedule. And it might list, number 11, box C, and then file folder number 22. And then it will correlate with what is on the item that they are going to complete. And that lets them know that they are going to complete it. And typically, I know in my classroom, and if anybody has any other ways that they've done this, the student would have it on their desk. There'd be a Velcro strip. Each of those numbers or letters would be sitting there on their desk. And then I'd have a reminder at the end of what they were working for. Typically, it was a break. And then they would pull off that number or letter, go find the material wherever I had it located in the classroom. They would match it, bring the material to their desk, complete it, and then they'd move on to the next one, putting that one back and going down their list. I've seen a lot of different ways people have done it, but I think that's the most traditional way. If you've ever heard of Teach, and it's TEACCH, Do I have that correct? It's 2 C's, right, guys? Yep, that's what I thought. You can do some more research on that. That is the official research-based, evidence-based practice of completing independent work, especially in a self-contained classroom. So you could research that more if you're interested on the exact procedure, but that was kind of the gist of how I used it and had schedules in my self-contained classroom. All right, so we're going to kind of switch gears here. We've talked about schedules. We've talked about how to organize. We've talked about how do you get all your stuff. How do you teach the students at the beginning of the year? And now we're going to get into kind of what content areas or what kind of things do you have the students complete for their independent work. So once you've got it all set up, what are you actually putting in those shoebox bins? A few of us have mentioned some things, but we want to dive in a little deeper and give you some more ideas of things we've used in our classroom. And so I'm going to start off with this one going with some academic skills. Now, it's kind of pretty much any academic skill you can think of can be a work task. So it could be a task card working on letter identification. It could be a file folder working on addition facts, and students are moving pieces to answer addition problems inside a file folder. I've even done things like completing a puzzle that has some kind of, maybe it has sight words on it and they're building a sight word with puzzle pieces. Something else I've done is taking clothespins and matching letters. I've also taken things like, I'm trying to think, writing activities. So I actually had a little baby tiny, a Magnadoodle. I'm dating myself here. So one of those Magnadoodles that have like the magnetic pens that write. It was a mini one I got at the dollar store, and I had these sight words on cards, and the students would have to copy them. So they'd practice writing skills. So those are all some different ways I've kind of taken academic skills and put them into my work task systems. Dawn, could you share a few functional or life skills tasks that you've had your students do?
Sure. Yeah. So some different kind of domains that you can think about when you think of functional and functional skills would be like personal care, home management, cooking and nutrition, money management, community skills, and then time management. And so some examples of those would be like, if you're working on personal skills, could they put the lid of like the container for a toothbrush, have the directions to put the toothbrush inside and close it up? If it was like different kinds of toiletries, you could have them sort either pictures or actual little travel size bottles of like lotion and shampoo and conditioner and those kinds of things. And there's so many other kinds. If you're talking about like home management, you could you could have them sort things that you could wash, whether that's darks and lights or those kinds of things, or practicing with the microwave, just like look at a picture and see how long it needs to be in the microwave for, and then practicing like putting that number on, say, like a picture of a microwave, folding clothes, sorting socks, sorting different kinds of pieces of clothing. Those are definitely some options. Also, making grocery lists, or taking those grocery lists and having them go and find some of the different things, even if that's pictures or if that's small little kinds of food, to make up that grocery list, to just practice. For some of the nutrition, you could look at the different ingredient items and talk about the food, the healthy food items. Again, you could do like a vending machine where they have different activities to load the vending machine of different things, or having different orders that they would pull from. For money management, it could range from sorting coins all the way up to like having them actually calculate different activities. And so going into like the community skills, having a sheet with different kinds of community signs. I feel like Jen, you may have something like this, but like where they have they would match it, the community signs, whether that's the picture to the picture to the word, and so much more, knowing what the public restroom sign is and what the phone sign is, and so many other things. So those are just a few. That's just the tip of the iceberg of some of the different activities that you could focus on functionally.
Awesome. Thank you. And Heather, let's talk a little bit about vocational tasks that we can incorporate.
Yeah, I feel like Dawn hit on a lot of really great ones that could overlap with that as well. But I was thinking more, of course, like when you break it down, it could be like domestic skills or job skills, right? When talking vocationally. So like being able to have some class jobs that really could cater to that. So if it is like sweeping the floor, vacuuming a carpet, wiping the tables or chairs, I know my students did that at the end of every day. That was a class job that everybody participated in. We all helped each other out as we wiped down all the tables and all the chairs with some type of cleaner or Clorox wipe or something of that sort. I'm even thinking some other things like hanging clothes, folding clothes, being able to measure with a ruler or measure with a tape measure, or the scale could be played into that. Counting money into an envelope to pay for items or just to pay for things. I'm trying to think what else that I've done in my classroom vocationally, like shredding papers, filing papers, setting the table could be part of that as well, if that's something you want to work on. Watering plants could be a really easy one where you just pick up a plant and we're now watering plants. If you are fortunate enough to have like some type of kitchen or a sink, if there's any dishes you could totally wash and have that be a job. I also had a laundry room in my classroom, so washing clothes and folding clothes and putting detergent in. I'm trying to think of some other ones. If you don't want to just sweep, you can also have a Swiffer, and a Swiffer is a great job to have as well. And I would say with support, but like if you want to work on like hammer and nails or using some type of things, I know there's the plastic screws as well. If you want to work on using a screw, dialing phone numbers, like I'm trying to think of anything for life and for older students. So if you're looking at us going, like, you're talking about a lot of elementary things, dialing a phone number and being able to put batteries in a remote, put batteries into a flashlight, those types of things are really great skills for our older students too. I know I even had a work task about putting pills in a pill case, following this like a visual strip of colors. It's not actual pills. You're using maybe beads or little pegs to like emulate pills, but they're working on opening the pill bottles or putting in the actual pills that they need. So those are some great vocational skills that you could be working on.
Awesome. All right. And the last area that we wanted to kind of touch on when it came to some activities or ideas for independent work was community. Ashley, can you give us some ideas on how we can utilize community in our independent workstations?
Yeah, good question. So I know Dawn and Heather and you guys all touched on a lot of things, but things I came up with were like shelving things in ABC order. So like whether it is matching cans to like a certain, you could even have something very small, guys. Like think outside the box creatively, using cardboard boxes, using canned goods that are empty. You can have people send in cereal boxes, anything that's like recyclable to shelve, and getting kids to practice that up and down motion. The heaviness of certain things. You could have them bag groceries and learning how to put the heavier items on the bottom, lighter items on the top. That kind of thing. You could talk about reading a map or reading business signs. You could have them put matching like a business card to the business, what that kind of looks like. You could use the community signs are a big one, like whether that looks like a file folder, a task card. You could have a variation because not all community signs look the same. Red lights look the same. I mean, stop signs look the same, but a clip art versus a real one, you could have them match those. Those are certain things that you could look at. But again, like even like shelving books, like I said initially, to work on that. And you could even ask your librarian, because that is something in a community, which was also typically in your building, that you could maybe swap over and kind of do together. So some good ideas.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea too of students, like for community, I visualize what you kind of said there, Ashley, at the end of going to different places, right? So going to either your school library or a local library, right? And doing some tasks there outside of the classroom, kind of getting some real world experience. And some of that has to start, though, of course, with doing it first in the classroom. We don't just want to take students out into the community without teaching them some of those skills first. And for anybody that's kind of wondering, kind of what our goal is. We did talk at the beginning about how independent work, the whole goal is for them to work independently so they can go out in the community. So Ashley's points there all about those different things that you can do. That's our main goal. So whether we're matching letters or we're matching community signs, our overall goal is to take those skills and then generalize them out into the real world, real life, where they may have a job one day or have something else they need to do independently on their own. So those were all great answers. Thank you guys for chiming in each of those areas. I think that gave everybody kind of a good idea of different ways you could take your materials and use them. All right, we've got a few more questions here. Our next one is, how can we use our paraprofessionals during independent work time? Now, if you remember at the beginning, I shared with all of you about how independent work is supposed to be without support. So that's kind of how this question kind of seems like, but wait, how are we going to use paras if the kids aren't supposed to be getting help from them? And so I'm going to take this one. I've actually done a lot of utilizing my paras during independent work time, but it wasn't because they were doing the tasks for the students, and it wasn't because they were, we did have a few students that maybe couldn't be quite as independent as we would have liked, and they may have had to go over and tap them on the shoulder to get them refocused and give them a prompt. Typically, we would have some kind of an IEP goal in place for time on task and things like that we would monitor, and then that para would assist with collecting data for that. So that's my first tip, is use them for collecting data. Because if we're doing all this practice with independent work, we should be keeping track of what they're completing, how long it's taking them to complete it, maybe how many prompts, if they do need some prompts to build up that stamina, so that we can continue. Maybe also just keeping track of if something is too easy to the point that the student is bored because they've done it so many times and they're getting distracted or they're leaving the area, and you know, because it's becoming something that's maybe more tricky when it comes to behavior, and you need to switch things up. So I've utilized my paras to kind of be a pair of eyes that are just kind of monitoring things so that they can give me information and data back on, do we need to switch something up? Is that task maybe too hard and I didn't realize it? Those kind of things. And then, like I said, if you have any IEP goals in your classroom about time on task or completing something independently, they can be there with those data sheets, you know, maybe in the background behind the student off to the side or just in view. And they're keeping track again of how long it's taking the student to complete it, how far along they get in completing the task, things like that. Another way that I've utilized my paraprofessionals during independent work time is actually the pre to students being independent. So I actually called it, I don't know if I actually had a name for it, but I ran a station with my paraprofessional. I had one. Her job the entire year was to build more independent skills for my students by working with them first on that task or activity to build up their ability to be independent so I could put it into their schedule during their independent work time. So let's say a student had no idea how to sort forks, knives, and spoons. So what I would do is during that time with that paraprofessional, her job would be, all right, let's get out the sorting tray. Let me show you what a fork is. Let me teach you what a spoon is. Let me teach you what a knife is and teach you where they should go. And then they'd slowly, we had to work a lot on fading prompts, and all of that came into play of, you know, fading the support and all of that. But the ultimate goal from that para was to teach them the skill so that eventually it's a skill they can do independently. So we could keep adding more skills to their work task abilities. And then I could add it into what they did during their independent time. So if you are in the case of, and Ashley, you could probably speak to this a little bit too, especially in early childhood, you don't often, sometimes you go, there's not that many skills they have yet that they are independent. So if you're going, how do I set up an independent workstation when they don't have a lot of skills to start? And it's not always just early childhood. I taught middle school and I had some students that needed a lot of support in the beginning, and then we eventually got there. But assigning a paraprofessional to be the person maybe to teach some of those skills, to build that student's repertoire of them, can be super helpful as well so that you have more to work with or more things for that student to work on as the year goes on. All right, we're getting down to our last question for today, and it's how do you incorporate classroom themes or units into your independent work? So I guess this question is kind of leading into maybe you're teaching about something in your class for the month. How do I kind of make that go with my work tasks if you like to go that route? Some of us are like, no, I'm like themes are not my thing, but I know some teachers love them. Ashley, would you be able to kind of expand on what teachers can do to incorporate themes in their work tasks or independent work?
Yes. So if you have a theme for every month or every week or every bi-week, whatever it works best for your classroom, especially in early childhood, we do ours every 2 weeks. We have 2 themes a month, and then I'm slowly working to make it so it's the entire center. Every center has something, but starting in just like with your file folders, if you're doing space and you're learning about that in science, put space file folders in your independent workstations, or add space visuals to your math center. Like, it can be very small to it. Or like when you're in math, do like 3, 2, 1 blast off, something very easy to incorporate it. In early childhood, we add to our dramatic play center. So if we're doing our pancake and waffles cafe, then our artwork also goes with pancakes and waffles. We're making waffles with progressive art. We're taking, like a spatula that you would make pancakes with and dipping it in paint onto the paper. And then a lot of my block centers, we will make up pancake, restaurant and things like that. So you can slowly incorporate it throughout your time. Again, if you're in a middle school, elementary, other setting, you could read a passage about pancakes. You could draw pancakes. You could count pancakes. There's a lot of different things you could do. In social studies, you could learn the history of pancakes. So if you think about it in that way, just very slowly start with one center or one station, one place, and then slowly as the years go on, add more. Don't jump all the way in and try to do every single station every single month with every single theme, because then you're going to get burnt out too quickly. So go slow. If you're going like, Ashley, how do I have all this stuff? Talk to other people in your district. A lot of times the girl my coworker and I, we switch. So she does pancakes and waffles and I'm doing donuts, and then we switch. So each of us are planning a center or a theme, and then we switch it. So it's a little bit less work. So find someone that works similarly to you in your county, district, school, and see if you guys can split the work that way. Makes it a little bit easier.
That's a great idea. I love the idea of kind of finding someone else that's kind of going to do the theme thing as well. And then you can kind of maybe do Havesies on all the materials or the storage of it, right? That can be a little tedious to store all your apples, because after September, you're not using apples anymore. All right, where are they all going? I will say too, my local library had bins that were themed and had some materials and manipulatives, and you could borrow them from the library. And they were these tubs that you could just carry out, and they had one for each month. And some of those materials lended themselves well to work tasks. And I think of things like those Target erasers that they have for like every theme. You can use those for counting. You can use those for stacking them. You can do all different kind of activities with those kind of things. And like Ashley said, it doesn't have to be anything crazy when you're doing themes. It may just be, the letters that you're matching are red because it's September, and then they're blue because it's January. It doesn't have to be, so intense that you're worrying about, running and buying a lot of things, because we all know, like we said earlier, we don't have all the funds to be, theming our classrooms every single month with all these materials and things. But I will say, adding those themes in can be fun for you and fun for your students to kind of see some new and fresh things. All right. Well, we want to thank all of you for watching this today. Thank you for learning more about independent work. And if by chance we didn't cover something, or you have a more specific question about something that we mentioned today, feel free to go into the Special Ed Socials Facebook group and leave us some comments and questions, and let us know what we can help you more with when it comes to independent work. Also, remember, all week we're going to be posting blogs, freebies, products, and tons of ideas to help you with getting started with independent work, or maybe if you're a more seasoned teacher and you've been doing it for years, hopefully we can give you a few new ideas going into the school year. And of course, all of us would love to connect with you and help you inside that Facebook group. So go ahead and, pop in and say hello, ask us questions on anything, and we'll be happy to help. We've had some great comments and questions already going in the group, so we'd love to keep that collaboration going. We will have a Q&A to answer all those questions that I mentioned you may have on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so you can come back and check that out as well. So thank you guys so much for coming and listening to our summer Special Ed Socials event that we're having, and we will see you next week.